So what does it take to be a good scientist, or rather, what should be the characteristics you look for in a student that you want to take on as a graduate student or whatever? And things like this, when you go into science itself. There's lots of fields one can go into, but I call it the 3 Ps. The 3 Ps is what I look for. Of course, everybody that goes into science generally they know their way around a computer, their mathematics skills are excellent, their statistical analysis understanding is very good. Those are givens, okay? So you will only pick people that do well in that. But once you get past those 3 things, there's 3 more things you kind of look for, especially in a student, or in yourself for that matter. If you're going to go into science, these are the 3 things you need to have: passion, patience, and perseverance. If you don't have these 3, don't go into science. If you don't have patience, which means basically you're not willing to wait, well then I would tell you right away, go into banking, go into the financial services, go into the stock market. Don't waste your time going into the sciences where you're going to spend 8 years in university, maybe 10, maybe longer, and then you're going to go into research careers where it may take you years just to find something really, truly exciting that really, exemplifies what it is you're trying to do. I mean, it might take, in astronomy for instance, I have to write up my observing proposals, I have to submit the proposals, so you're talking a month to write it up, or a couple of weeks depending on who you are, maybe a day. And then of course you send it in, and it takes weeks to come back. They come back a month later, so you get observing in 6 months to a year later. So it's a 1-year process just to get observing. And you may get rejected. Then you have to wait. And in some facilities you have to wait for the cycle of the facility to come back into the right orientation. So you really have to have patience when you go into science. And passion is to me, is paramount. Passion is really the key to this story. I'd rather, if I don't have perseverance, then go into something that's not going to cause me issues. Work with puppies. Go work with dolphins. Go work with things that actually make you feel good, so that when you see them you feel kind of joy and happiness, and it relaxes you, because everything you do in science, especially when you're doing lab research, or you're doing astronomy, or you're doing anything where you're doing an experiment of some ilk, it takes time, and they fail, and things break. So the 3 things that are very important, at least for me when I look at what it takes to be an astronomer, are passion, patience, perseverance. Everything else, the math skills, the computing skills, their logic, understanding of logic, etc., they already have. Passion, patience, perseverance. I want to talk about passion for a moment as it relates to science. I wanted to be an astronaut. I watched them walk on the moon in '69, and it got me absolutely excited about sciences, engineering, mathematics, the things that actually got me to where I am today, a research astronomer. Okay, I don't get paid as a research astronomer at the moment, irrelevant. What's relevant is I absolutely love doing what I do. But passion is very important in science. Without passion, you might as well do something else. You might as well go into, I don't know, go into somewhere you're going to make a lot of money, and then it can pay for your hobbies, because if you're not passionate about this, really, and I mean, I can give you examples or show you examples of the science we do. There's nothing exciting about it unless you really love it. And that's the real passion. So I'll give you a simple example. We were, in 1991, a guy named Carl Menton discovered a new transition, and he did all of his observations in the northern hemisphere in the US. And someone in the southern hemisphere had to do the corresponding observations of sources there to confirm what he found, which is all the ones that had one type of transition also had this new one. So basically, we in South Africa said, well, we can do this. My boss came back from the conference very excited, said, we can do this. And we had my colleague, Mike Gaylord, myself, some technicians, and we started building this receiver out of bits and parts that we had at the observatory, plus things we could buy literally at a hardware store. And we built this receiver, and we put it onto the telescope. And I wrote the entire paper before we even did the observing, before the receiver was finished. I'd already written the paper. As I said, Carl Menton found that if this transition is present, you will find this new one. So I just needed to, I wrote that all up. I knew the source we're going to look at. Anyways, so we get the receiver done, we're taking it up the telescope, myself and the mechanic who's going to do the installation, and I'm giving him a hand. So I'm carrying it in one hand, and I'm holding on this ladder. There's this part on the telescope where there's a vertical ladder. You're about 50 feet off the ground, and you're going up one rung at a time. And the guy suddenly stands on my hand while I'm holding on to the receiver, and I can't drop this thing because this is it. This is our life. This is what we've all worked for 3 months, and I'm holding on, and I refused. I just refused. It hurt like hell. Anyways, the guy eventually got off my hand. We installed we installed the receiver, and the observations take off. The Saturday we're doing the observations, and we're just finding these amazing results. Absolutely amazing results. Stunning. And they confirm precisely what the guy in the US had discovered. Okay, Carl Menton. So everything worked fine. All I did was I took the images, put them right into my paper, redid the tables because I didn't have the numbers yet, and I put them into my paper. We submitted. That paper was accepted within 3 days of submission and published, which is, quite a feat in itself. But while we were doing the actual observing that day, we were all giddy, like little school kids. And I called my ex-girlfriend, girlfriend at the time, and I was explaining to her everything, how excited we were and that, everything, all these big, fancy this and that. And she just says to me very calmly and very cold, it just says, "Do you get paid overtime for this? It's Saturday." And I'm like, well, I was thinking to myself, well, one, the relationship is over, as you can imagine. Two, she had no interest, none. And that is what passion is. Because it was, for me, I was passionate about the results that we were doing. My friends were the same way. But my girlfriend was not. She had no interest whatsoever in astronomy. And that's what it takes sometimes. You've got to see past all those things. And that's why I always talk about patience and perseverance. Because, in a way, all of those things feed into your passion. And that's just the way it is. But I can tell you this. If you're not passionate about what you do, in science especially, get the hell out. Because all scientists are good in math, they got good computer skills generally speaking, they understand statistics, and they become great in the stock market or in banking. Go into those fields, make a lot of money. If you're not passionate, don't go into science. Go into somewhere you're going to make money. So, passion is number one in my books when I'm looking for students and in others. And to add one last comment to this, I've met so many people in science who are not passionate, and I don't understand why they're doing it. Like, why go into this? You don't get paid well, you work long hours, you suffer in silence. I mean, observatories around the world are in rural, very rustic places on the top of a mountain in a desert, out in the middle of nowhere because we want to get away from pollution. And why would you do this if you're not passionate? It astounded me. And yet there are those people that still do this field, regrettably. But fortunately not many, but there are those few. Anyways, I would suggest to them and anybody else, no passion, go into banking. Alright, so we've talked about passion, very important. I want to talk about patience, very briefly. You have to be very patient in most science fields. I mean, can you imagine, I'll give you an example, oceanography, you're studying the bottom of the ocean, and you're out there, you've got to get on a ship, you've got to go out into the ocean, you've got to put in your submersible, you got your cameras on, and now you got to wait. And you might go days. Without seeing nothing. You see a couple plants, flora, a few fish swim by, and whatever the heck comes by until you see something that's really interesting or different that you haven't seen before. I mean, it requires patience. Same with astronomy. I mean, I observed sources for years, until something might happen, whether there's a flare, it suddenly gets really bright, or it's periodic, so it turns on and off like a lighthouse, okay? But it takes years to prove that. So if it has a 500-day period, that means you've got to get at least 3 cycles in. You've got to take 1,500 days to prove that it's periodic. And to see that, to even figure out it's periodic in the first place, requires very long-term monitoring of sources. And I have some data sets that are 40 years old, that they're 40 years long. Okay, and there are people in optical astronomy that have data sets that go back hundreds of years. So patience is very important, especially in astronomy, but true in most sciences, right? You really have to, it takes time to set up the experiment, to do the experiment. It's rare that you do an experiment, say, okay, well, we're just going to do and blah, 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 and then you just go off and you quickly do a couple of things and wham, I'm done. Okay, geez, it's 2 o'clock, I might as well go for a beer. No, patience, really important, okay? So in astronomy, be patient, okay? Be patient. And so, passion, obviously, as I just said, without it, go into something else. But without patience, you can't really be a decent astronomer because it just takes time. And most sciences are exactly that way. So patience. That's a virtue, I think. All right, so, and lastly, of course, of the 3 P's is perseverance. And well, this one, it just goes without saying, really. I mean, as I talked about in the passion component of this, when I talked about my ex-girlfriend saying, they had no interest in what I was doing. And you just got to persevere. You just got to persevere. There'll be people around you that have absolutely no clue what you're talking about, no interest in what you're talking about, and you just got to carry on, because otherwise you just lose hope. You just lose interest in what you're doing, and you just think, why am I doing this? Well, that's a big no-no. So perseverance is very important, and also because in the science fields, especially astronomy, there are so few jobs. Really, there's something like 10 or 20,000 positions in the world in astronomy, and you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of students graduating with PhDs each year that want those jobs. Okay, so you could imagine people in their careers, retiring at 65, which professors do not do. So it becomes very difficult for young astronomers and whatnot to sort of see what their future is if there isn't lots of jobs. And there's the areas, if you want to work in anywhere, if you're willing to travel, if you're willing to go places which are off the beaten path, there's jobs for you in it. But it's difficult. It's difficult, and I understand that. In fact, this is probably my weakest area of the 3 Ps. I got bored. I actually got bored in when I was 36, and I asked myself a simple question: do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Do I want to write papers, maybe a book, maybe get a job as a professor at a university, lecture? And I said no. I said screw it. I just said, what for? 20 people read my papers. 30, 40, maybe if I'm lucky. I'm thinking, this is crazy. Part of the reason I'm doing these videos is because of the fact that nobody reads my papers. And not because I think they're interesting. It's because the field is so small. We're so specialized. I look at masers. I study star formation. There's only hundreds of us in the whole world that do this. They're the only people interested in what I do. And most of them don't care what I'm doing because they're doing their own thing. Anyways, but you got to be able to see past all that and then just carry on. And a lot of my friends, they were able to get past the boredom. I wasn't. And they went in and they carried on. Their career trajectory was excellent. They carried on and they became heads of institutes, professors at universities, etc., etc., etc. I did not. I changed careers. I went into whatever. Anyway, so perseverance is very important as well. See past all the headaches. If you're really passionate about something and you're very patient, this is the one that you got to get past as well. It's just the way it is. There are going to be so many obstacles in your path as it relates to your career, whether it's astronomy or engineering, I don't care, in the STEM fields, in anything in life, to be honest. This is something you got to see past. And regrettably for me, I couldn't see past my boredom. And that's kind of entertaining. People who know me will understand. Perseverance. So the 3 Ps, right? Passion, patience, and of course, perseverance. No passion, no problem. Go into banking. You'll enjoy it.